used to think success meant external validation. Corner offices with panoramic views, business cards with impressive titles, and family dinners where everyone finally acknowledged that you had made it. I was wrong. Real success is what happens when you stop needing that validation altogether. 2 years ago, I walked away from a 6-figure salary in marketing to start my own agency. My family thought I was having a quarter-life crisis. My sister, Natalie, the very embodiment of corporate success, mockingly called my business my expensive hobby. My parents started every conversation with the sacrosanct, "Are you sure about this, Jessica?" Their voices laced with a mixture of concern and poorly concealed disappointment. But I believed in what I was building. I believed in Cooper Creative, even when no one else did. And then came Natalie's engagement party. The venue of choice was Bellini's, the most expensive and pretentious restaurant in Seattle. Champagne flowed freely, designer outfits glittered, and my sister shone at the center of everyone's attention. She shone, that is, until she decided to use her celebratory toast to turn my business into the punchline of a cruel joke in front of everyone we knew. 3 hours earlier, I stood in front of the mirror, preparing for this evening. 3 long hours. Not because I'm particularly high maintenance, but because when you're about to face the Thompson family gauntlet, you armor up. My navy blue dress was the nicest thing in my closet. I'd bought it on sale last year for a client presentation. Back in those distant days when I still allowed myself the occasional splurge. I had meticulously straightened my usually curly hair, transforming it into a smooth, obedient sheet. A hairstyle my mother would approve of. I applied makeup with an uncharacteristic scrupulousness, masking the traces of sleepless nights spent working. I even dug out the pearl earrings my grandmother had left me. The only person in our family who believed my rebellious spirit was a strength, not a flaw. Not that anyone would notice. In the Thompson family hierarchy, I was firmly established as the other daughter. The one who didn't quite fit. Natalie was the golden child. A straight-A student, prom queen, an Ivy League graduate, and now a rising star at a prestigious consulting firm. And I, as my father was fond of reminding me, was still figuring things out. Never mind that I had deliberately chosen to leave corporate life. Never mind that my digital marketing agency, Cooper Creative, had actual paying clients. In their eyes, without a prestigious title and the backing of a major company, I was just playing business. The spring rain in Seattle was coming down in sheets. As I pulled into the Bellini's parking lot, I could see the restaurant glowing with warm light through the rain-streaked windows. Crystal chandeliers sparkled, and waiters in crisp black and white uniforms moved deftly between tables. I checked my phone one last time. 3 new client emails that needed a response. A draft campaign requiring approval. Numbers for tomorrow's presentation that needed to be crunched. For a moment, I seriously considered turning around, making up some excuse, and spending the evening doing actual, productive work instead of subjecting myself to the subtle digs and pitying glances that awaited me inside. But I couldn't do that to Natalie. Whatever our complicated relationship, she was still my sister. And despite everything, some stubborn part of me still hoped this milestone might somehow reset things between us. Bring us back to the closeness we'd had as children, before competition and comparison had soured everything. I grabbed the emerald green gift bag from the passenger seat. Inside was a handcrafted picture frame that had cost more than I could really afford, and made a dash through the rain to the restaurant's entrance. The Sullivan-Thompson engagement dinner, I told the hostess. She consulted her tablet. Yes, they're in our private dining room, down the hall and to your left. I could hear the celebration before I even reached the doorway. Laughter, the clinking of glasses, and that particular tenor of my father's voice when he was holding court. I took a deep breath, fixed a smile on my face, and stepped into the lion's den. The private room was stunning. Dark wood, white tablecloths, and strategic lighting that made everyone look their best. About 40 people filled the space. Most I recognized. My parents' friends, relatives, Natalie's college roommates, colleagues from her firm. My mother spotted me first, waving me over with a bit too much enthusiasm. At 58, Catherine Thompson was still a striking woman. Ash blonde hair expertly colored to hide any gray. A slim figure maintained through rigorous discipline, and always impeccable clothing. Tonight, she wore a silver cocktail dress that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. Jessica, we were beginning to wonder. She air-kissed my cheeks in a ritualistic gesture, her expensive and subtle perfume lingering on my skin. Her eyes did a quick assessment of my appearance, lingering a second too long on my dress. Not new, not impressive enough. I knew the verdict had been filed away for later commentary. The traffic was terrible. I lied. It was better than admitting I'd been answering client emails until the last possible minute. Well, you're here now. Your father's over there with the Whitmores. You remember Craig Whitmore, Natalie's mentor from the firm? And Natalie and Marcus are by the windows. You should go congratulate them. Her tone made it clear this wasn't a suggestion. I navigated through the crowd, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. My father, Robert Thompson, stood with his back to me, gesturing emphatically as he spoke to a silver-haired couple. 25 years as one of Seattle's top corporate attorneys had given him an aura that dominated any room he entered. I decided to delay that particular interaction and headed instead toward my sister and her fiancé. Natalie, as always, was flawless. Her black dress was obviously designer. Her dark hair was arranged in an elegant updo that emphasized her cheekbones. At 32, just 2 years older than me, she looked every inch the successful professional on the rise. Beside her stood Marcus Chun, whom I was meeting for the first time. Tall, with an athletic build barely contained by his tailored suit. He had the easy confidence of someone who'd never questioned his place in the world. His family owned a chain of high-end hotels across the West Coast. Old money meeting new money in a perfect merger of assets and ambition. Jess. Natalie's smile was camera-ready. You made it. I was just telling Marcus about your little venture. My spine stiffened at little venture, but I maintained my smile. It's not so little anymore, actually. We just signed our 10th client last week. Wow, 10 whole clients. She laughed, turning to Marcus. My sister's the rebel in the family. Walked away from Peterson and Burke 2 years ago too, and I quote, disrupt the industry. Now she's running her marketing thingy from her one-bedroom apartment. The way she said apartment made it sound like I was operating out of a cardboard box. Marcus extended his hand. It's great to finally meet you, Jessica. Congratulations on the new client. His handshake was firm, his smile genuine enough. I couldn't immediately tell if he was humoring me or actually interested. What's your specialty? He asked. Before I could answer, Natalie laughed again. Oh, she does social media posts and email newsletters. Right, Jess? All that digital stuff. I took a sip of champagne to mask my irritation. Actually, we specialize in integrated digital campaigns for B2B companies in the tech and healthcare sectors. We're primarily focused on lead generation and conversion optimization. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Interesting space. Very competitive. It is, I agreed. But there's room for boutique agencies that can move quickly and adapt strategies in real time. The bigger firms tend to be locked into legacy approaches. Legacy approaches are legacy for a reason. They work, Natalie interjected. That's why companies like Peterson and Burke handle the Fortune 500 clients, while she waved her hand dismissively. Startups handle the smaller fish. The conversation, mercifully, shifted when one of Natalie's friends pulled her away to discuss bridesmaid dresses, leaving me briefly alone with Marcus. How long have you been running your agency? He asked. Just under 2 years. It was slow at first, but we're gaining momentum now. Me and my 2 contractors. I'm hoping to bring them on full-time once we secure a few more retainer clients. He seemed about to ask another question when my father's voice boomed across the room, announcing it was time to be seated for dinner. The seating arrangement was clearly strategic. Natalie and Marcus at the head of the table, flanked by both sets of parents, important friends and colleagues, radiating outward based on status. I found myself near the far end, seated between my cousin Tyler, who was busy texting under the table, and an elderly aunt who was already half asleep. As the first course arrived, some delicate scallop creation, my phone vibrated in my clutch. I discreetly checked it under the table. An email from Healthream, a potential client I'd been courting for months. They wanted to schedule a call tomorrow to discuss a proposal. My heart raced. Healthream was exactly the kind of client that could transform Cooper Creative from surviving to thriving. Jessica. My mother's voice cut through my excitement. Phones away at dinner, please. I looked up to find her giving me that particular disappointed look I'd grown so familiar with. 30 years old and still being scolded like a teenager. Sorry, I murmured, tucking the phone away. The glow of the potential new client dimmed under the weight of familiar disapproval. Dinner progressed with predictable Thompson family dynamics. Dad dominated the conversation. Mom managed the social nuances. Natalie shone brightly as the center of attention. I answered polite questions from relatives about my situation, who clearly viewed entrepreneurship as a temporary phase before I came to my senses. But don't you miss the stability of corporate life? Aunt Linda asked, genuine concern in her voice. Not really, I replied honestly. I prefer building something of my own. Well, your father could always find you something at the firm if this doesn't. She trailed off, not needing to complete the thought. If this doesn't work out, if you fail when you fail. The assumption of my eventual failure was the unspoken backdrop to every family gathering. By the time dessert arrived, an elaborate tiramisu construction, I was mentally exhausted from navigating the conversational minefield. I'd nearly made it through unscathed when Natalie stood, tapping her knife against her champagne flute. The room quieted immediately. Camera phones emerged. My sister had always known how to command attention. Before we finish this wonderful meal, she began, her voice carrying effortlessly, Marcus and I want to thank you all for sharing this special evening with us. She spoke eloquently about their relationship, their plans for the future, the wonderful merger of the Sullivan and Thompson families. She acknowledged her parents for their example of success in both career and marriage. She thanked Marcus's parents for raising such an exceptional man. She acknowledged key mentors and friends who had supported their journey. Then her gaze found me, and something in her expression made my stomach tighten. And of course, I have to acknowledge my baby sister, Jessica. A ripple of indulgent laughter moved through the room. At 30, I was hardly a baby, but Natalie never missed an opportunity to emphasize our hierarchy. While most of us chose traditional paths, she continued, her champagne glass tilted at a perfect angle, Jessica has always been determined to do things her own way. My smile felt frozen on my face. 2 years ago, she walked away from a perfectly good job at Peterson and Burke, turning down the kind of opportunity most marketers would kill for, to start her own company. The way she emphasized company made it clear she considered the term generous. From her apartment. More laughter. Cooper Creative. Isn't it, Jess? I nodded, not trusting my voice. Anyway, she's been disrupting the digital space ever since. She actually made air quotes, drawing another round of chuckles from the audience. No office, no employees, but lots of passion. Maybe she can handle our wedding website as her gift? It would be good exposure for her portfolio. The room erupted in laughter. Even my parents were smiling indulgently, as if Natalie had just told a harmless inside joke, rather than publicly humiliating me. I maintained my smile through sheer force of will, though I could feel heat crawling up my neck. This wasn't a toast. It was an execution disguised as sisterly teasing. To Jessica, Natalie concluded, raising her glass higher, still figuring it out while the rest of us move forward. We love you anyway, sis. Everyone raised their glasses, echoing. To Jessica, while I sat there, burning with humiliation and anger. The worst part wasn't just the mockery. It was that no one in the room seemed to recognize it as cruel. This was just Natalie being Natalie, the successful sister gently teasing the struggling one. Business as usual in the Thompson family. I mechanically raised my glass, took a sip, and wondered if anyone would notice if I simply vanished from my seat and fled the restaurant. My eyes blurred, and for a moment, the sparkle of the crystal chandeliers melted into a single, painful smear of light. I stared at my plate of half-eaten tiramisu, the bitterness of humiliation mixing with its sweetness. It was in that moment, at the very bottom of my despair, that something unexpected happened. And everything changed. The moment Natalie's words, "We love you anyway, sis," hung in the air, mingling with the clinking of glasses, I felt a wave of icy numbness wash over me. The room around me blurred into a smear of expensive outfits, self-satisfied smiles, and the low hum of voices. I sat like a statue, a frozen smile plastered on my face that required a Herculean effort to maintain. It felt as if I relaxed my facial muscles for even a millimeter. My face would shatter into 1,000 pieces, exposing the storm of humiliation raging inside. I stared at my half-eaten portion of tiramisu, and the dessert tasted as bitter as my sister's words. Every beat of my heart throbbed in my ears, drowning out the hypocritical congratulations. I could feel the stares on me, some curious, some sympathetic, and some overtly gloating. This was a theater, and I had been cast as the fool. My own family, my parents sitting at the head of the table, had done nothing to stop it. Their condescending smiles hurt more than open hostility. They didn't see the cruelty in Natalie's words. To them, it was just harmless family dynamics. The successful daughter teasing the one who was still figuring things out. They didn't understand that every such word was a hammer blow, chipping away at the self-belief I had so painstakingly built, brick by brick, over the last 2 years. I mechanically raised my glass, brought it to my lips, and took a sip of champagne. It tasted flat, like water. A single thought spun in my mind. Run. Get up. Knock over the chair. Run out of this room. Out of this restaurant. Out of this life where I was judged by criteria I had long ago rejected. But my legs felt rooted to the floor. I was paralyzed, pinned to my seat by my own shame. It was in that moment, when the silence in my head became deafening, that something shifted. Marcus, Natalie's fiancé, standing beside her, made a barely perceptible movement. He gently placed a hand on her shoulder, and the touch seemed to interrupt her triumphant monologue. He didn't sit down. Instead, he cleared his throat softly, drawing the attention that was still focused on me. "I'd like to add something if I may," he said. His voice was warm, but it carried an undercurrent of authority that instantly quieted the last of the whispers. All eyes shifted to him. Natalie's smile faltered slightly. It was obvious that this addition to the program was not part of her script. She had expected everyone to continue sipping champagne and discussing her magnificence after her toast. When Natalie first told me about her sister Jessica, Marcus began, his gaze sweeping the room before settling on me. She described her as the creative one in the family, the one who followed her own path. I was intrigued, especially since my family has always valued entrepreneurship. I held my breath. What was he doing? Trying to soften the blow? Continuing the humiliation in a more sophisticated way? I didn't know what to expect. He turned slightly, addressing the entire room. But what Natalie didn't mention, and here he paused, a subtle hesitation that made everyone lean in. Perhaps because she wasn't aware, is that Jessica Thompson isn't just experimenting with self-employment. She is the founder and CEO of one of the most innovative boutique digital agencies emerging in the Pacific Northwest. A complete silence fell over the room. It was so quiet you could almost hear the bubbles fizzing in the champagne glasses. I stared at Marcus, unable to believe my ears. The smile had completely vanished from Natalie's face, replaced by an expression of utter bewilderment. She looked at her fiancé as if seeing him for the first time. Marcus continued, his voice steady and confident, like a man used to addressing a board of directors. Cooper Creative recently executed a campaign for Nexa Health that has become something of a case study in our industry circles. For those who don't follow digital marketing metrics, they achieved a 287% increase in qualified leads while simultaneously reducing cost per acquisition by nearly 30%. My breath caught in my throat. Nexa Health was indeed my client, and those were our exact results. But how on earth could Marcus know this? This was confidential data I had only discussed with the client. As someone who sits on the board of several technology companies, he went on, and I saw my father at his seat, straighten up, his eyebrows rising. I can tell you that these kinds of results don't happen by accident. They require strategy, insight, and exceptional execution, particularly from a young agency competing against established players with much deeper resources. He raised his glass toward me. His gaze was direct and respectful. There wasn't a hint of condescension or pity in it. There was recognition. So yes, Jessica is building her business from her apartment. For now. Many of the most successful companies in the world started in garages, dorm rooms, and yes, apartments. Amazon, Apple, Google. None of them began in gleaming corporate headquarters. I could see my mother's expression shift from polite dismissal to confused recalculation. She was looking at me as if trying to reconcile the image of her unsuccessful daughter with the portrait Marcus was painting. My father, who had seemed impenetrable until now, was watching me with a new, assessing interest. His eyes held not just shock, but a complex process of re-evaluation, as if he had suddenly discovered an unknown variable in a long-solved equation. To Jessica Thompson, Marcus concluded, his voice filling the quiet room, whose courage to build something from nothing exemplifies the very entrepreneurial spirit we claim to value in this country. Nexa Health isn't her only success story, and I have a feeling we're just seeing the beginning of what Cooper Creative will accomplish. He raised his glass even higher. To both Thompson sisters, each successful in her own way. An awkward, stunned silence followed. People seemed frozen, unsure how to react. Then, catching themselves, they hastily raised their glasses, mumbling, "To the Thompson sisters," but with considerably less enthusiasm than they had shown for Natalie's toast. My sister's face had transformed into a complex mask of confusion, humiliation, and barely contained anger. She had been dethroned from her pedestal at her own party, and the person who had done it was the man who was supposed to be her greatest champion. She slowly sank back into her chair, her movements stiff, like a marionette with its strings cut. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at Marcus, and her gaze held a silent question. "How could you?" I raised my glass toward Marcus, meeting his eyes in a silent thank you. Then I took a deliberate, slow sip of champagne. And this time it had a taste. The taste of victory. For the first time that evening, and perhaps for the first time in my life at any family gathering, I felt something other than inadequacy and defensive exhaustion. I felt seen. Truly seen. As the waiters began clearing dessert plates and conversation cautiously resumed, another miracle occurred. Several people who had previously avoided eye contact with me suddenly found reasons to engage. My father's law partner, an elderly man who had always looked at me with polite bewilderment, leaned across the table and asked, "Jessica, would you happen to have a business card? I'd be interested to learn more about what you do." A family friend, who owned a small manufacturing company, mentioned that they were just about to revamp their digital strategy. Even Aunt Linda, who only an hour ago had been worried about my stability, leaned in and whispered, "I had no idea your little business was doing so well, dear. How wonderful." The shift was subtle but unmistakable. In the space of a 2-minute toast, Marcus had completely reframed the narrative about me and my work. He hadn't just defended me. He had rewritten my story in the eyes of these people, using a language they understood, the language of success, numbers, and industry recognition. He had transformed the little hobby in an apartment into an innovative boutique agency with impressive metrics. And this new status, voiced by an authoritative figure, turned out to be the key that unlocked doors that had been closed to me for years. I sat there, accepting these belated signs of attention, and felt something inside me straighten. The part of me that had always cowered at these family dinners, expecting the next jab, was now squaring its shoulders. I was no longer an object of pity. I was a subject of interest. And it was all thanks to a man I barely knew, who for some reason had decided to stand up for me. My gratitude toward him was immense. But even stronger was the feeling of relief. It was as if a heavy, invisible weight had been lifted from my shoulders. A weight I had carried for so long I had grown accustomed to it. The weight of my family's doubt, which I had, without realizing it, made my own. That evening, in that expensive restaurant, under the light of crystal chandeliers, I began to understand that this burden no longer belonged to me. As the evening wound down and guests began to say their goodbyes, I found a moment of solitude at the bar, ordering a glass of water. My head was buzzing from the champagne and the emotional overload. I was still trying to process what had happened. The world, which just a few hours ago had seemed hostile and unshakable, was now in motion. Its tectonic plates had shifted, and I found myself at the center of these changes. I felt as though I had survived an earthquake, after which the landscape would never be the same. I hope I didn't overstep. a quiet voice said at my elbow. I turned. Marcus was standing there. His expression was friendly, but his gaze was appraising. He was studying me, trying to gauge my reaction to his intervention. Overstep. I was genuinely surprised. You saved me. I don't know how to thank you. He smiled slightly, and there was no smugness or superiority in his smile. I just told the truth. But how do you even know about Nexa Health? I asked, still unable to believe what had happened. Let alone our metrics? I'm an investor in Corvus Health Tech, he explained calmly. They partner with Nexa Health on their patient management platform. When they presented their quarterly results to the board last month, your agency's campaign metrics were the highlight. Their marketing director couldn't stop talking about the innovative approach you took with their segmentation strategy. I stared at him, momentarily speechless. You really didn't know they were that impressed? He seemed genuinely surprised. I knew they were happy with the results, I murmured. But I had no idea they were presenting our work to their board. Well, they are, he smiled. And not just to their board. The campaign is being discussed in several industry forums I'm part of. Before I could respond, Natalie materialized beside us. She slipped her arm possessively through Marcus's, her voice honey-sweet but her eyes as sharp as blades. There you are. Mom and Dad are looking for you. They want to discuss venues for the rehearsal dinner. Marcus nodded but didn't move. I was just telling Jessica how impressed I am with her agency's work. Did you know Cooper Creative is handling Nexa Health's digital strategy? Natalie's smile tightened even more. I'm sure it's very niche work. It's cutting-edge work, Marcus corrected her gently. The kind of work that larger agencies often can't execute because they're too mired in traditional approaches. I could see my sister processing this unexpected alliance, recalculating her position in real time. Then, with practiced grace, she shifted tactics. Well, that's wonderful, she said, her voice bright but her eyes remaining cold. Jessica has always been creative. I'm glad she's found a way to make it work for her. Now we really should join my parents. As they walked away, Marcus glanced back and gave me a subtle nod. The gesture felt like a sign of solidarity. I stood alone at the bar, sipping my water, feeling the ground shift beneath my feet. For the first time in 2 years, someone had publicly acknowledged the value of what I was building. And not just anyone, but an influential business leader whose opinion carried weight in the very circles my family respected. Someone who had recognized my success before even meeting me, based solely on the quality of my work. The night that had started with humiliation had ended with validation from the most unexpected source. I had come prepared for the usual digs and condescension, armed with my well-practiced smile and deflection techniques. Instead, I had been publicly humiliated by my sister, then unexpectedly championed by her fiancé. A plot twist I couldn't have anticipated in my wildest dreams. As I was getting my coat, my father approached me. His expression was uncharacteristically uncertain. Jessica, he said in his usual gruff voice. A moment. I braced myself, unsure of what to expect. A reprimand for causing an awkward scene? Or perhaps another warning about risk. This Nexa Health account, is it substantial? He asked. Of course. That would be his first question. Size, figures, metrics, that's what he understood. Yes, I said simply. A 6-figure annual contract, and we're in talks to expand the scope next quarter. He nodded slowly, processing this information and weighing it against his long-held assumptions about my hobby. And you have other clients of this caliber? 3 others in the same range. Several smaller ones. And a pipeline of potential new business that would double our revenue by year's end, if even half of them convert. Another nod, this one longer. We'll need to have a proper talk. About your business model, growth strategy, capital needs. Not, when are you coming to your senses, or, how long do you plan to continue this experiment, but an acknowledgement, however grudging, that what I was building might be a legitimate business. I'd like that, I said, and I meant it. Driving home through the rain-slicked Seattle streets, I replayed the evening's events in my head. I realized something fundamental had changed, not just in how my family perceived me, but in how I perceived myself. For 2 years, I had carried their doubt like a heavy weight, measuring my progress against their skepticism rather than my own goals. Despite my clients, despite my growing revenue, despite all the evidence that Cooper Creative was building something valuable, some part of me had internalized their narrative that I was just playing business. That real success only happened in the corner offices of established firms. Marcus's intervention hadn't just changed their perception. It had crystallized something I had been too close to see. I wasn't failing. I was building, growing, succeeding by the metrics that actually mattered in my industry. The fact that my family couldn't or wouldn't see it didn't make it any less real. As I pulled into my apartment building's parking garage, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Jessica, it's Marcus Chin. Hope you don't mind. Got your number from the contact list Natalie's mother is using for wedding planning. Wanted to apologize if I created any awkwardness tonight. Also, one of my portfolio companies is looking for exactly your expertise. The CEO would like to meet. Let me know if you're interested. Either way, what you're building is impressive. Keep going." I sat in my car, rereading the message, a slow smile spreading across my face. The evening that had started with humiliation had ended with validation from a completely unexpected source, and potentially, a new high-value client. More importantly, it had ended with the realization that I needed to stop measuring my worth through my family's distorted lens. Success wasn't their approval. Success was building something I believed in, serving clients who valued my work, and refusing to apologize for choosing a different path. As I finally headed up to my apartment, yes, the one bedroom that also served as Cooper Creative's headquarters, I felt lighter than I had in months. Tomorrow, I would wake up early, prepare for my call with Healthream, follow up with Marcus about his portfolio company, and continue building my business. Not to prove anything to my family, not to make Natalie eat her words, but because this was the work I was meant to do, the company I was meant to build, regardless of who believed in it. The next morning, I woke to a cascade of notifications on my phone. 3 missed calls from my mom, a terse text from Natalie, "Hope you enjoyed your moment. Next time try not to hijack someone else's celebration." 2 LinkedIn connection requests from my father's colleagues, and most surprisingly, an email from Healthream confirming our call for 11 a.m. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling of my apartment. Morning light filtered through the blinds I kept meaning to replace, casting thin stripes across the small space that served as both my bedroom and, during working hours, my conference room. The desk in the corner was stacked with client folders. The closet door was ajar, revealing the rack where business clothes hung beside everyday wear. For 2 years, I'd felt a twinge of embarrassment about this setup whenever family members visited, which was rare. My mother would glance around with thinly veiled disapproval, making comments like, "It's cozy," or "This must be temporary." My father had visited exactly once, standing awkwardly in the center of the room as if afraid to touch anything, asking pointed questions about my exit strategy. But this morning, looking at my modest apartment through fresh eyes, I felt something unexpected. Pride. This wasn't a failure to launch. This was a launching pad. Marcus was right. Garages, dorm rooms, apartments. The geography mattered less than what was being built here. I reached for my phone. First, I texted my mother a brief message that I had calls scheduled but would touch base in the evening. Then I accepted the LinkedIn requests. I ignored Natalie's text. The old Jessica would have reflexively apologized. The new Jessica, who had been publicly acknowledged as a CEO with actual accomplishments, felt no such compulsion. Some messages don't deserve a reply. The morning unfolded with unexpected momentum. I showered, got into my call attire, a professional top, comfortable pants no one would see on Zoom, and made coffee. And then my phone rang. "Marcus Chin. Jessica, good morning. Hope I'm not calling too early." "Not at all," I replied, surprised. "I was just preparing for a client call." "I'll be brief. About that portfolio company I mentioned. Vertex Solutions. They're a healthcare tech startup with a solid product, but they're struggling with their go-to-market strategy. Their CEO, Diane Mercer, would like to meet with you this week if possible. I sent her the Nexa Health case study from your website, and she was impressed." I blinked, trying to process this unexpected development. "That would be great. I can move some things around." Excellent. And one more thing. And please don't feel any pressure. Natalie doesn't know I'm calling. Our relationship works best when we keep business and personal separate. I understood immediately. He wasn't just protecting me from Natalie's jealousy. He was protecting his own relationship from the fallout of helping her sister. Completely understood. I assured him. I appreciate the connection, but there's no need to complicate things at home. This stays between us. Thank you, he said, relief in his voice. Diane will reach out directly. And Jessica, what I said last night wasn't just for show. Your work is genuinely impressive. After we hung up, I sat at my desk, my hands wrapped around my coffee mug. In the span of 12 hours, I had gone from being the family disappointment to having potential new business delivered directly to me by my sister's fiancé. The irony was not lost on me. The domino effect, set in motion by a single toast, was continuing to gain momentum, and I felt like this was only the beginning of something big. The call with Healthream went even better than I had dared to hope. Their marketing director, Paul, already had preliminary approval for a 6-month contract. As we discussed the details and timelines, it became clear that this wasn't just another project. It was a comprehensive campaign that would require additional resources. For the first time in a long while, I spoke to a potential client not from a position of a supplicant, but from that of a sought-after expert. Marcus's toast, however indirectly, had given me a boost of confidence. I no longer felt the need to downplay the scale of my operations. When Paul asked about my team, I didn't hesitate for a second, stating that we would bring in additional specialized support for certain aspects. And it sounded not like an excuse, but like a well-thought-out growth strategy. After the call, I immediately contacted my freelancers, Sarah and Miguel, scheduling an urgent strategy session. And then I did something I hadn't dared to do for months. I wrote to Andrea Collins. Andrea had been my colleague at Peterson and Burke, a senior strategist with 10 years of experience who was growing increasingly disillusioned with the firm's bureaucracy. We had kept in touch after I left, and at our rare coffee meetings, she would speak with envy of my freedom, while I secretly envied her stable paycheck. 3 months ago, she had mentioned that she might be open to considering options if the right opportunity came along. My email was direct. Healthream has verbally committed to a 6-month contract. Senior strategy support is required. Interested in discussing a potential role at Cooper Creative? No pressure, just exploring options. I hit send before I could change my mind. The day flew by in a flurry of work, and by evening I was completely absorbed in a content review for one of my current clients when the phone rang. My mother. For a moment, I considered not answering, not being ready for her commentary after the previous night. But avoiding difficult conversations had never been my style. Jessica, are you busy? Her voice had that particular cadence she used when she was trying to sound casual, but had a specific agenda. I'm in the middle of some client work, but I can talk for a few minutes. Is everything okay? Everything's fine. It's just, your father and I were talking, and we thought, perhaps you might join us for dinner this Sunday? Just the 4 of us. You, me, Dad, and Natalie. I frowned. Sunday family dinners were a Thompson tradition from which I had been gradually excluded as my career choices became a source of tension. The last time I had been explicitly invited was at least 6 months ago. What's the occasion? I asked cautiously. Does there need to be an occasion for family to have dinner together? Her tone was slightly defensive. We just thought it would be nice to catch up. Your father mentioned you have some new clients. And there it was. Marcus's impromptu toast had transformed me overnight from the family disappointment to someone worthy of interest. The business they had dismissed as a hobby was now a topic my father wanted to catch up on. Part of me wanted to decline out of principle. Where was this interest when I was struggling to land my first clients? Where was this support when I was working 18-hour days to establish myself? But another part, the part that, despite all my protestations, had always craved my family's approval, recognized this for what it was. An opening. A crack in the fortress of their judgment, through which a real connection might possibly break through. Sunday should work, I finally said. What time? 6. Your father's grilling. The relief in her voice was palpable. And Jessica, it was good to see you looking so professional last night. That blue dress suited you. Coming from my mother, this was tantamount to effusive praise. I thanked her and ended the call, leaning back in my chair. Another unexpected turn in this rapidly shifting landscape. On Sunday evening, I drove up to my parents' house in Bellevue. This sprawling contemporary mansion, with its clean lines and glass walls showcasing carefully curated views, was the place where I had grown up. But as I pulled into the circular driveway behind Natalie's sleek BMW, I once again felt like a visitor rather than a daughter returning home. I had given considerable thought to my outfit for this dinner, not out of vanity, but for strategic reasons. The Thompson family communicated as much through presentation as through words. I chose dark jeans, a cashmere sweater, and ankle boots. Casual enough to signal I wasn't trying too hard, yet polished enough to avoid criticism. On the passenger seat rested my portfolio, a sleek leather case containing campaign materials, client testimonials, and key metrics. My father had asked to discuss the business, and I had to be prepared. My mother opened the door before I had a chance to knock. "Jessica, right on time," she kissed my cheek. "Your father's on the deck with the grill. Natalie's helping me with the salad. Come in." The house was as immaculate as ever. I followed her to the kitchen, where Natalie was meticulously arranging vegetables on a platter. She glanced up at me, her expression neutral. "Jess," she nodded. "Nice sweater." From Natalie, this was a peaceable greeting. I returned the nod and asked about the wedding planning. A deliberate olive branch. She responded with restraint, but I could hear a note of excitement in her voice. My mother, clearly pleased with our civility, sent me to the deck with glasses for wine. My father stood at the massive built-in grill, overseeing several steaks with the same intensity he brought to complex legal negotiations. "Jessica, good timing," he said, not taking his eyes off the grill. "These are about done." I handed him a glass. He accepted it, took a measured sip, and returned to his task. "Your mother mentioned you've had a busy week. New clients. Direct, efficient, focused on tangible outcomes. Classic Robert Thompson." "Yes. 2 new significant contracts. Healthream and Vertex Solutions. Both came through this week." He nodded, his attention still seemingly on the steaks, but I knew he was processing the information. "Healthcare and tech. Vertex is developing patient management software. Marcus mentioned Nexa Health at the dinner. Are they a competitor to Vertex?" "More of a complementary service," I explained. Nexa focuses on patient engagement, while Vertex is about practice management. It's a competitive space, but fragmented. There's room for innovation. He glanced at me, his expression thoughtful. "You seem to understand the industry dynamics." It wasn't praise, but from my father, acknowledgement of competence was significant. I felt a small, warm glow of satisfaction that I immediately tried to temper. I was 30 years old, running a successful business. I shouldn't need my father's approval to validate my professional acumen. "I've focused on specific sectors," I explained. "Healthcare, tech, financial services. Better to be deeply knowledgeable in a few areas than superficial across many." He flipped the steaks one last time and closed the grill lid. "Smart approach. Specialization enables premium pricing." He took another sip of wine. "You brought materials?" I pointed to the portfolio I'd set on a nearby table. "Good," he checked his watch. "These need to rest for 5 minutes. Why don't you walk me through what you've brought while we wait?" And just like that, I found myself on the deck of my childhood home, giving an impromptu presentation to my father. I outlined campaign strategies and conversion metrics, while he listened with the same focused attention he typically reserved for legal briefs and investment prospectuses. He asked sharp, relevant questions. He nodded at the appropriate moments. He even made a note on his phone when I mentioned a particularly successful email sequence we had developed for Nexa Health. "This approach to segmentation," he said as I concluded. "It's different from conventional marketing wisdom." It is. Most agencies still segment by demographics. We're using predictive modeling based on microbehavioral triggers. It's more complex to implement, but delivers significantly better results. He was silent for a moment, studying me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. Then he said, You've built something substantial here, Jessica. More substantial than I realized. The words hit me with unexpected force. After 2 years of dismissal and skepticism, this simple acknowledgement felt momentous. Before I could respond, the deck door slid open, and my mother appeared. Robert, are those steaks ready? Everything else is on the table. Perfect timing, he replied, gathering his grilling tools. As he passed me, he paused. We'll continue this conversation inside. Dinner proceeded with surprising pleasantness. My mother had prepared all my favorite sides. Natalie was polite, if not warm. But most surprisingly, it was my father who repeatedly steered the conversation toward my business, asking follow-up questions about campaigns and client acquisition strategies. At one point, he even mentioned to my mother, Jessica's implemented some innovative approaches to customer segmentation that are delivering impressive results. I could see Natalie's jaw tighten slightly at this unexpected praise, but she maintained her composure. The facade of a peaceful family dinner began to crack only during dessert. My father set down his fork and looked directly at me. These new contracts, how are you planning to handle the increased workload? I'm bringing on additional support, I replied. 1 senior strategist who could potentially become a partner. 2 junior positions. My regular freelancers are increasing their hours. He nodded. Office space. Not immediately. We'll work remotely for now. But yes, an office is in the 3-month plan if current growth projections hold. And the capital requirements for this expansion? I hesitated, sensing where this was heading. Manageable with current cash flow and the advance payments from the new contracts. I've run the projections. I'd like to see those projections, he said, his tone making it clear this was not merely casual interest. Any growing business requires capital. The Thompson family has resources that could be strategically deployed to accelerate your growth. The table went silent. My mother froze with her water glass halfway to her lips. Natalie's expression shifted from polite attention to barely concealed shock. Dad, she said, her voice tight. Are you offering to invest in Jess's business? My father glanced at her, his expression neutral. I'm expressing interest in reviewing the opportunity. Any investment would need to make financial sense, naturally. But you've never. Natalie stopped herself, clearly rethinking. She took a careful breath. I mean, that's very generous of you to consider. The subtext was crystal clear. My father had never offered to invest in any of Natalie's endeavors because she had never needed it. Her path had been straight and conventional. The Thompson family resources had been deployed for her education, not her career advancement. Offering financial support to my business represented a fundamental shift in family dynamics. An acknowledgement that my path, while different, might be worthy of the same level of investment. I appreciate the interest, I said carefully, but I'd want any investment to be structured properly. Professional terms, clear expectations, appropriate valuation. My father nodded approvingly. I would expect nothing less. Send me your projections and current financials. We can discuss further once I've reviewed them. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of polite conversation and coffee. As I was leaving, my father walked me to the door. That senior strategist you mentioned, he said in a low voice. Someone from your former firm? Yes. Andrea Collins. 10 years of experience. Good choice. I've met her at industry events. Sharp woman. He paused. Your presentation today was impressive, Jessica. Professional, data-driven, articulate. You've clearly built something with potential. Coming from my father, this was almost a shock. I thanked him, trying to keep my voice steady. I'll send the financials tomorrow, I promised. Driving home, I felt as though I had stepped into an alternate reality. My father, Robert Thompson, who had spent 2 years questioning my judgment, my business acumen, my very decision to strike out on my own, had just offered to invest in Cooper Creative. Moreover, he had praised my work in front of Natalie. The family dinner, which had previously been the site of countless humiliations, had become the site of my triumph. The domino effect was continuing, and I realized this was only the beginning. I didn't yet know where this path would lead, but for the first time in a long time, I felt I was heading in the right direction. And I was no longer walking it alone. The following week blurred into a whirlwind of strategy sessions, client calls, and planning meetings. The energy I had once spent battling self-doubt and defending my choices was now entirely channeled into creation. I felt as if a dam holding back my ambitions had finally burst, and I found myself in the middle of a powerful current of opportunities. First things first, I held a meeting with Sarah and Miguel. When I laid out the scale of the Healthream contract and the potential project from Vertex Solutions, their eyes lit up. This was exactly what we had all been waiting for. The chance to move from survival to executing the bold ideas we had discussed for so long. This means we'll need to expand and fast, said Sarah, our brilliant content strategist. Her mind was always working 2 steps ahead. And we'll need more sophisticated analytics, added Miguel, our data guru. If we're managing campaigns of this scale, our current tools will need an upgrade. I listened to them and felt a surge of confidence growing inside me. This was no longer my company. It was our company. That's exactly why I want to discuss your roles, I said. I want you to be not just contractors but a full-fledged part of the team, with stock options, bonuses, and the ability to influence the strategic direction of Cooper Creative. Their reaction was exactly what I had hoped for, a mix of surprise and enthusiasm. They had believed in this project from the beginning, working for modest fees when I was barely making ends meet. Now I could offer them something more than just money. I was offering them a stake in the future we were building together. That same day, I received a reply from Andrea. Definitely interested. Free for coffee tomorrow at 2, at our usual spot. The next day, sitting across from her in the small coffee shop, I felt like a different person. Our previous meetings had been mutual therapy sessions. She would complain about the corporate grind, and I would complain about the instability of freelancing. Today, I wasn't just a former colleague. I was a founder and CEO, coming with a concrete proposal. You look different, Andrea said, studying me intently. There's a power about you. A new client. Potentially several. I replied, unable to hide my excitement. Including Healthream. Her eyebrows shot up. Impressive. They've been notoriously loyal to Brenner and Associates for years. Until now, I smiled. I laid out the project for her, the scope, the objectives. And then I got to the point. This is more than Sarah, Miguel, and I can handle alone. I need someone with senior strategy experience who can take on client management while I focus on business development. And I thought of you. Andrea was silent, slowly stirring her Americano. I could see the gears turning in her head. She was weighing the risks and opportunities. It would be a risk, she finally said. Peterson and Burke has excellent benefits, a clear promotion track. And meetings about meetings, strategies designed by committees, and innovative ideas diluted until they're safe enough for the most conservative client. I finished for her, using her own words from our past conversations. She laughed. Using my own complaints against me. Fair. What exactly are you proposing? Start on a freelance basis, I said. Take on Healthream. See how we work together. Keep your day job for now. If it's the right fit for both of us, we can discuss a more permanent arrangement. Partnership, potentially. The word partnership hung in the air. Her eyes widened. Cooper Creative won't stay a one-woman show forever, I said firmly. I've always envisioned building a real agency, not just a freelance consultancy. I need people I can trust. People with complementary skills. She nodded, her expression serious. Send me the details on Healthream. I'll think about it. By the way, she added as we were saying goodbye, I'm interviewing with Mackenzie Davis. It was a power move. Mackenzie Davis was one of the top agencies in Seattle. She was letting me know she had options. Fair enough, I nodded. Review the materials. No pressure. As we parted, she gave me a hug. You know, I've always admired your courage. Walking away from PMB to build something of your own. Most people talk about it. You actually did it. On Friday evening, I sent my father the requested financial documents. I had worked on them for 2 nights, triple-checking every figure. I knew he would scrutinize them, and I couldn't afford a single mistake. I attached detailed projections, a market analysis, client profiles, and a concise executive summary outlining our competitive advantages. It was the most professional document I had ever created. His reply came on Monday morning. A short email. Received. Initial review looks sound. Would like to discuss in person. Lunch tomorrow at 12:30 at Morton's? Morton's. It was his power place. An old-school steakhouse where million-dollar deals were made. This was not a father-daughter lunch. This was a business meeting. I confirmed the time, my heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and fear. The next day, sitting at the table across from him, I felt like I was taking an exam. But this time I knew the material. Overall, he began, setting aside the menu. The fundamentals are sound. Your operating margins are better than the industry standard. Your client acquisition costs are reasonable. Your revenue projections appear conservative rather than optimistic, which I appreciate. I nodded, waiting for the but. What's less clear, he continued, is your scaling strategy. You've outlined the immediate needs, staff and office. But I don't see a roadmap for growing beyond a boutique agency. What's your 5-year vision for Cooper Creative? It was a quintessential question from my father. Long-term strategy, scale, market position. And it was a question I had been asking myself more and more frequently. In the next 12 months, the focus is on building a core team of 8 to 10 specialists, a physical office, and a client portfolio concentrated in our key sectors. I began, my voice as businesslike as his. On a 3 to 5 year horizon, there are 3 paths. Remain a niche boutique, grow horizontally by expanding services, or grow vertically by deepening our expertise. I prefer a hybrid of the second and third options, expanding our service offerings within our core industry verticals. He listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. And what would success look like at the 5-year mark? Revenue, team size, market position. I took a deep breath. 20 to 25 employees. Annual revenue of $5 to $7 million. Recognition as the premier digital agency for healthcare technology firms in the Pacific Northwest. He nodded slowly. Ambitious but not unrealistic, given your current trajectory. He closed his portfolio and looked me straight in the eye. I'm prepared to offer an investment of $250,000 in exchange for a 15% equity stake in Cooper Creative. On the following conditions. As he laid out his terms, staged funding tied to growth metrics, a board seat, quarterly reviews, I was struck by the surreal nature of the moment. My father was treating me not as his disappointing younger daughter, but as a business founder worthy of a significant investment. The terms he offered were tough, but fair. Professional. When he finished, I took a moment. I appreciate the offer, I said carefully. The terms are generally reasonable, though I'd want to discuss the vesting schedule and performance metrics. And before we proceed, I think it's important to discuss the family dynamics this investment would introduce. A flicker of surprise crossed his face, quickly replaced by approval. A valid concern. I propose a clear separation. Business discussions happen in formal settings. Family gatherings remain personal. And Natalie? I asked directly. His face tightened. Your sister's career choices are her own, as are yours. This investment is a business decision based on Cooper Creative's potential, not a family matter. It was both true and a profound lie. In theory, yes. In practice, it was a tectonic shift in our family relationships. I'll review the terms once I receive them, I said, deciding to table the more complex emotional dimensions. And pending that review, I'm tentatively open to moving forward. We finished lunch discussing market trends and potential synergies. As we parted outside the restaurant, he said, Your presentation on Sunday and our discussion today were impressive, Jessica. You've clearly found your path. It may not be the one I would have chosen for you, but I can't argue with the results you're achieving. It was perhaps the most direct and positive assessment I had ever received from him in my adult life. I thanked him, trying to keep my voice from trembling with emotion. That same evening, I got a reply from Diane Mercer at Vertex Solutions. They were accepting my proposal. The contract was signed. And the next day Andrea wrote, I submitted my notice at PNB. In 2 weeks, I'm all yours. Is it too soon to feel this excited about a job change? I smiled as I typed my reply. Never too soon to be excited about the right move. We'll celebrate once you're officially on board. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place faster than I could have imagined. New clients, an expanding team, potential investment capital. After 2 years of struggling to stay afloat, Cooper Creative was suddenly accelerating at a pace that was both exhilarating and slightly terrifying. I was building my empire, brick by brick, and the foundations of that empire were proving to be much stronger than I had ever thought. The next family dinner was scheduled for Friday. It was my mother's idea, an obvious attempt to smooth over the sharp edges after the events of the engagement party, and my unexpected promotion in the family hierarchy. The official reason was to discuss the details of Natalie's wedding. The unofficial reason, I suspected, was an attempt to restore a fragile equilibrium and demonstrate that, despite my sudden ascent, Natalie was still the center of the Thompson universe. I drove to Bellevue with mixed feelings. On one hand, I felt more confident than ever. I had signed contracts, a confirmed investment from my father, the final documents were with my lawyer for review, and Andrea ready to join the team. On the other hand, I knew this evening would be a minefield. Every word, every glance would have a double meaning. When I entered the house, I was greeted by the same scene as always, but with subtle changes. Natalie, Marcus, and my father were sitting in the living room with glasses of wine. Natalie was animatedly describing lighting options for the wedding venue, her engagement ring sparkling with each gesture. She paused as I entered, and a tight smile appeared on her face, one that didn't reach her eyes. "Jess, you made it." It sounded less like a greeting and more like a statement of fact. "Wouldn't miss it," I replied, accepting a glass of wine from my mother. I sat in the armchair opposite my father, and the room fell silent for a moment. All eyes were on me. This was a new position for me. Before, I had been part of the background, almost invisible. Now I was a factor to be considered. "Hi, Marcus. Good to see you again," I said. He nodded warmly. "Likewise. I heard your presentation to Prime Health went well yesterday." The room fell silent again. This time, it was almost deafening. I saw my father straighten up, a flicker of interest in his eyes. My mother looked politely bewildered, and Natalie's smile vanished completely. "Word travels fast," I said lightly. "Yes, it was a positive meeting. But nothing's decided yet, of course." "James Richardson is notoriously demanding," Marcus continued, seemingly oblivious to the tension. "The fact that he was actively engaged in your presentation is a good sign." Natalie set her glass down on the coffee table, with a little more force than necessary. "Perhaps we could discuss Jessica's business another time? We were just reviewing photographer options for the wedding." "Of course," Marcus agreed smoothly, placing his hand on hers in a conciliatory gesture. "My apologies for the tangent. Please continue." The conversation returned to wedding plans. Photographers, florists, menu options, the guest list. My mother and Natalie shared details with enthusiasm. My father occasionally interjected with practical comments about logistics and costs. I kept the conversation going, asking polite questions, and making encouraging comments when appropriate. But all the while, I was observing. I observed the subtle dynamics between Natalie and Marcus. He was unfailingly supportive, but gently guided her most extravagant ideas toward more practical solutions. She, in turn, deferred to his opinion on some matters but firmly asserted her preferences on others. They functioned as a balanced team. I realized with some surprise that theirs was a genuinely compatible partnership. Beyond the social and financial advantages of their match, they seemed to sincerely appreciate each other's strengths and accommodate each other's weaknesses. This observation softened my perspective slightly. Whatever our complicated relationship, Natalie had chosen her partner wisely. "Jessica." My mother's voice interrupted my thoughts. "You'll need to confirm your availability for the engagement photos next month. Natalie wants family pictures at the Botanical Gardens." I nodded. "Just let me know the exact date and time." "It's the 15th, Natalie said. "Saturday morning at 9. Marcus's family is flying in specifically for it, so we need everyone to be on time." The slight emphasis on the word "on time" did not go unnoticed. It was a reference to my supposedly habitual lateness, a family myth that persisted despite considerable evidence to the contrary. "I'll be there," I assured her, letting the implied criticism pass. As dinner progressed, the conversation gradually shifted from wedding details to broader topics. I mostly listened, noting the subtle shifts in family dynamics. My father, usually dominant, seemed more measured. My mother, always attuned to maintaining harmony, made several deliberate attempts to include me in conversations not related to the wedding. Marcus occasionally directed questions about business my way, but quickly switched topics when he noticed signs of irritation from Natalie. The tension that had been hanging in the air finally broke during dessert. "So Dad," Natalie began in a deliberately casual tone, "Jessica mentioned you're considering some sort of investment in her company. Is that moving forward?" My father glanced at me briefly before answering. "We're in the final stages of negotiating the terms. If all goes according to plan, the deal will close next week." "How interesting," Natalie said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "I didn't realize you were looking to diversify into marketing agencies." "It's not about the industry," my father replied evenly. "It's about the business fundamentals and growth potential. Cooper Creative has demonstrated impressive client acquisition and retention metrics, with operating margins above the industry standard." It was the kind of assessment he might offer about any investment opportunity: clinical, data-driven, emotionally neutral. Yet in the context of our family dinner, it carried additional weight. It was a public acknowledgement of my business acumen, a recognition of Cooper Creative as a legitimate enterprise worthy of serious consideration. "Well," Natalie said after a brief pause, "it's certainly an unexpected development. From a corporate career to a startup in an apartment to a family investment in a matter of weeks. Quite the transformation." The passive-aggressive undertone was unmistakable, though carefully calibrated to maintain plausible deniability. 2 years, I corrected her gently. Cooper Creative has been operational for 2 years, building client relationships and refining our methodology. The recent acceleration is based on a foundation that's been in progress since I left Peterson and Burke. "Of course," she conceded without sincerity. "I just meant the family's perception seems to have evolved rather suddenly." Marcus placed his hand on hers again, this time with a slight squeeze that said, "Careful." "Speaking of perception," he interjected, smoothly changing the subject. "I've been meaning to ask your father about the Robertson case that was in the news last week." It was a skillful diversion. My father, never one to resist discussing legal matters, immediately launched into a detailed analysis of the case. The moment of tension passed, though Natalie's lingering gaze in my direction suggested our underlying issue remained unresolved. As the evening concluded, Marcus approached me while Natalie was discussing final details with my mother. "I hope I didn't overstep earlier by mentioning Prime Health," he said quietly. "Melissa Kent is an old friend, and she happened to mention your presentation when we spoke yesterday." "No harm done," I assured him, though Natalie obviously would have preferred a different topic. He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "It's a complex adjustment period for everyone. Your success is well-deserved, but it represents a significant shift in long-established family dynamics." The observation was surprisingly insightful. He acknowledged both the legitimacy of my achievements and the real challenge they posed to existing relationships. It suggested a degree of emotional intelligence I hadn't fully appreciated in our previous encounters. "I appreciate your understanding," I said sincerely, "and your support, professional and otherwise. It's meant a great deal during this transition." He smiled slightly. "The quality of Cooper Creative's work speaks for itself. I've simply helped connect the dots for a few people who needed to see it." Driving home, I reflected on the evening's subtle revelations. The family ecosystem was indeed rebalancing, with each member adjusting to a new understanding of my place within it. My father now saw me as a business founder worthy of investment. My mother was making tentative efforts to include me more meaningfully in family discussions. Even Natalie, beneath her obvious resentment, seemed to be grappling with a new reality in which her sister might be something other than a cautionary tale of poor career choices. The shift felt significant, yet fragile. A recalibration that could easily revert to established patterns if not carefully maintained. My phone buzzed. A text from Andrea. Monday, 8 a.m. Our first official day as the expanded Cooper creative team. I'll bring coffee and strategy. You bring the vision and the client list. Deal. I smiled as I typed my reply. Deal. The real adventure was beginning. Whatever complexities lay ahead in family dynamics, the professional path was clear and energizing. Cooper Creative was transitioning from survival to growth, from potential to realization, from a one-woman consultancy to a genuine agency with expanding capabilities and influence. And I, despite 2 years of doubt, struggle, and dismissal from those who should have supported me most, was finally being recognized for exactly what I had always believed I could be. Not just a founder, but a successful CEO, building something of value in the world. A new place at the table had been won. Now I had to hold it. The call from Melissa Kent at Prime Health Network was like a lightning strike on a clear day. I had been trying to get through to them for months. I sent cold emails that went unanswered. I tried to find mutual connections on LinkedIn, but their corporate fortress seemed impenetrable. And now they were calling me themselves. This was a direct result of Marcus's intervention. And I knew it, but I also knew that a mere recommendation guaranteed nothing. The door had been cracked open, but I had to walk through it on my own. The presentation was scheduled for Thursday, giving me less than a week to prepare. This wasn't just another potential client. This was a whale. A client that could change everything. Accounts like this don't just bring in revenue. They become a calling card that opens any door. Winning this battle would mean elevating Cooper Creative to a whole different league. I cleared my calendar for Monday, canceling everything except the most essential client commitments. I dedicated the entire day to developing our approach. I sat at my desk, surrounded by printouts of their annual reports, marketing materials, and articles about them in the trade press. My one-bedroom apartment had transformed into a war room. I felt like a general planning a decisive battle. By midday, I had a draft of the presentation strategy. I decided not to try to compete with the large agencies on their turf. Not by boasting about size or decades of experience. My weapons would be deep expertise, flexibility, and an innovative approach. I wanted to show them not that we could do the same things others did, but that we could do what others couldn't. Before diving into the details, I called Andrea. Although she hadn't officially joined the team yet, I already considered her my partner. I needed her strategic mind. This is substantial, she said after I walked her through Prime Health's needs. They're essentially looking to overhaul their entire patient engagement strategy across multiple channels. That's the kind of project Peterson and Burke would assign a team of 8 to 10 people. Which we don't have, I admitted. At least, not yet. But we have specialized expertise and a more efficient approach. What's your honest assessment? Can we deliver if they sign with us? Andrea was silent for a moment, considering. I appreciated her for that pause. She didn't offer empty encouragement. She analyzed. With the right team structure, yes, she finally said. But we'd need to be very strategic about resource allocation, and extremely clear about the scope. Have you considered proposing a phased approach? Start with their highest priority initiative to demonstrate our capabilities, then expand the engagement based on the results. It was brilliant. An elegant solution that allowed us to prove our value without taking on an overwhelming commitment up front. It mitigated the risk for both us and them. You're a genius, I said, and it was the plain truth. We spent the next hour refining the presentation strategy. Andrea offered insights about Prime Health's competitive position that I hadn't considered. You know, she said toward the end of our call. PMB tried to get a meeting with Prime Health for over a year without success. The fact that they reached out to you directly says a lot. Your reputation is growing. After the call with Andrea, I got back to work with renewed vigor. The idea of a phased approach became the centerpiece of my presentation. The first phase, a redesign of their patient portal, their weakest link. It was a concrete, measurable project that would allow us to show results quickly. On Thursday morning, I woke up with a sense of focused calm. I knew my material. I believed in our approach. I carefully selected my outfit. a charcoal gray suit that projected professionalism without corporate stiffness, and a silk scarf in a deep teal that added a touch of personality. I wanted to look like someone who could handle a project of this magnitude, yet bring fresh thinking to the table. The Prime Health offices occupied several floors of a modern tower in downtown Seattle. Everything was glass and polished stone. The reception area featured the company's mission statement etched into a glass wall: advancing healthcare through innovation, compassion, and excellence. Melissa Kent greeted me personally and escorted me to a conference room where 4 other team members were waiting, including James Richardson, their chief marketing officer. His presence confirmed the seriousness of their intent. "Thank you for making time for us on such short notice," Melissa began after the introductions. "As I mentioned, we're reevaluating our patient engagement strategy." Richardson leaned forward. He was a man in his 50s, with a shrewd gaze and the aura of someone accustomed to making decisions. "Before we get into the details, I'm curious about your experience with healthcare clients. Marcus Chen spoke highly of your work with Nexa Health, but I'd like to understand the full scope of your experience in this sector." It was a fair question. Standard due diligence, but also a potential turning point. Prime Health typically worked with large, established agencies with decades of experience. Cooper Creative's portfolio, while impressive for our size and age, couldn't match their history. I took a deep breath. Our agency was founded specifically to address the gaps in how traditional marketing approaches serve specialized industries like healthcare. I began framing our relative youth as a strategic advantage. Instead of offering generalized marketing expertise superficially applied to healthcare, we've built our methodology around the unique challenges that healthcare organizations face. I walked them through our work with Nexa Health and HealthReam, emphasizing the specific metrics we had improved and the strategic insights that had driven those results. I touched on our approach to the Vertex Solutions product launch, highlighting how our understanding of provider workflows had reshaped their go-to-market strategy. "What differentiates us," I concluded, "is not the length of our client list, but the depth of our engagement with the healthcare ecosystem. We don't just market healthcare services. We understand the regulatory environment, provider economics, the patient journey, and the outcomes measurement that shape effective healthcare communications." Richardson nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "An interesting perspective. Most agencies lead with their decades of experience, elaborate case studies, and extensive client rosters. Those are valuable assets," I acknowledged. "But they don't always translate to innovative thinking or agile execution. Sometimes, extensive experience creates blind spots and procedural inertia that limit effectiveness, especially in rapidly evolving sectors like healthcare technology." It was a calculated risk. I was essentially suggesting that Prime Health's traditional agency relationships might be hindering rather than helping them. But Richardson's slight smile told me the message had resonated. "You've certainly done your homework on our current challenges," he said, gesturing to the presentation materials I had provided. "Let's dive into your proposed approach." For the next hour, I walked them through our analysis of their current strategy, identifying specific opportunities for improvement, and outlining a phased implementation plan that would deliver measurable results at each stage. The team asked insightful questions, challenged certain assumptions, and engaged deeply with the strategic framework I presented. I felt it was no longer a presentation, but a working session. They saw me not as a vendor, but as a partner. As the meeting concluded, Richardson stood and extended his hand. "This has been illuminating, Jessica. You've given us much to consider, particularly your observations about the personalization gaps in our current digital touchpoints. We have a few other conversations scheduled, but you can expect to hear from us by early next week." Melissa walked me to the elevator, her expression warm. "Between us, that went exceptionally well," she said. "James doesn't usually engage that actively in preliminary presentations." "I appreciated the thoughtful questions," I replied, maintaining professional restraint despite the surge of optimism. "Your team clearly understands the complexities." "One more thing," she added as the elevator arrived. "The phased approach you suggested, starting with the patient portal redesign instead of attempting a comprehensive overhaul at once, was particularly smart. It addresses our most pressing need while giving us time to align internal stakeholders for the broader strategy. Stepping out of the building into the bright midday sun, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had just happened. Prime Health, an organization that typically worked with agencies 10 times our size, was seriously considering Cooper Creative for a major strategic initiative. Whether we ultimately won the business or not, we had earned their respect and consideration, which placed us in a completely different league compared to where we were just a few weeks ago. My phone buzzed. A text from Andrea. "How did it go?" "Very well," I replied. CMO was engaged. Sharp questions but positive signals. Decision by early next week. Her response was immediate. "Outstanding. Celebration dinner tonight?" Today was my last day at PNB. Officially a Cooper Creative team member as of tomorrow. We arranged to meet at a waterfront restaurant at 7. It was at that moment I remembered my father's dinner invitation for Friday at the same time. I had checked my calendar as promised and found no conflicts, but I hadn't confirmed my attendance yet. That dinner would inevitably involve detailed wedding discussions with Natalie at the center, likely still harboring resentment. Under normal circumstances, I might have made an excuse to avoid the potential tension. But my father's pointed comment about family obligations made it clear that my absence would be noted and interpreted as a deliberate slight, potentially complicating our business negotiations at a critical juncture. I sent a brief message to my mother. "Looking forward to dinner tomorrow night. Is there anything I can bring?" Her response was immediate and enthusiastic. "Just yourself, dear. So glad you can join us. Natalie has the most beautiful photos from potential photographers to show." The subtext was clear. The evening would be entirely focused on Natalie's wedding plans, and my role was to be a supportive audience member. Still, maintaining family harmony, or at least the appearance of it, seemed prudent given the complex dynamics. The battle for the giant had been won on the professional field. Now came the more subtle and complex battle. The battle for my place in a new family reality. The lunch with my father at Morton's was scheduled for the following Tuesday. I had nearly a week to prepare, and I used that time to the fullest. I wasn't just working on the presentation for Prime Health. I dove deep into the financial documents he had sent me. I hired a lawyer specializing in venture capital investments to analyze the proposed terms. I wanted to walk into that meeting not as his daughter asking for help, but as an equal partner negotiating the future of her company. It was a strange feeling. My father, Robert Thompson, was a legend in Seattle's legal circles. He was known for his toughness, for his ability to find the weak spot in any deal. I had grown up hearing stories of how he destroyed opponents in the courtroom. And now, I was to sit across from him at the negotiating table. A part of me was trembling with fear, but another newer and stronger part felt a thrill. I knew my business better than anyone. I knew its strengths, its potential, and its vulnerabilities. And I was not going to concede what was critical for the future of Cooper Creative. Morton's was exactly as I remembered it. Dark wood, leather booths, dim lighting, and the smell of money and power. The maitre d' greeted me by name, which was a new experience, and led me to a corner table where my father was already seated, reviewing documents on his tablet. He looked up as I approached and even rose slightly from his seat, an old-school gesture he never abandoned. "Jessica, right on time." He indicated the chair opposite him. "Shall we order first? The Chilean sea base is excellent today." We went through the familiar ritual of ordering food. He knew the menu by heart and had a clear opinion on every dish. It was his way of establishing control, of setting the tone. I let him, knowing the real battle would begin later. When the waiter left, he put away his tablet and pulled a leather portfolio from his briefcase. He placed it on the table between us. "So," he began without preamble, "I've reviewed the documents you sent. Your lawyer obviously did a good job. He made several reasonable amendments." "He's one of the best in the city," I replied calmly. "I know. I've faced him in court a few times." A shadow of a smile crossed his lips. "He's a tough negotiator." "Well, that speaks in your favor." He opened the portfolio. "Let's go through the key points. Governance. Your lawyer suggests my board seat be non-voting, as an observer. I can't agree to that. If I'm investing my capital, I want to be able to influence strategic decisions. This was the first shot, and it was aimed directly at the heart of my control over the company. I understand your position, I said, trying to keep my voice even. However, for a company at an early stage, flexibility and the ability to make quick decisions are critical. A board with veto power could slow us down. My proposal is a compromise. Your seat will be observational for the first 18 months. This will give us time to prove the effectiveness of our strategy. After that period, if we hit certain key performance indicators, your seat can be converted to a full voting one. My father listened, his fingers steepled. He hadn't expected that response. He expected me to either concede or get emotional and defensive. Instead, I had offered him a business solution. What key performance indicators, he asked. Doubling our annual revenue and signing at least 2 more clients at the prime health level. I replied without hesitation. It's ambitious but achievable. He was silent for a few moments, thinking. Reasonable, he finally said and made a note in his documents. Next point. The performance metrics for the staged funding. You propose tying them to client acquisition. I believe they should be tied to net profit. Client acquisition is a vanity metric. Profit is a sanity metric. Profit is important, but at this stage, our main priority is growth and capturing market share, I countered. We will be reinvesting most of the revenue into expanding the team and developing new services. Focusing solely on net profit in the first 2 years will limit our growth potential. I propose a hybrid model. The first tranche of funding is tied to revenue and client base growth, the second to profitability metrics once the company reaches a certain scale. We negotiated like this for 45 minutes. We discussed every point. The vesting schedule for his equity, my founder's options, the exit terms. It was the most difficult and most direct conversation we had ever had. I could feel my brain working at full capacity, analyzing his every word, anticipating his next move. And I could feel my respect for him, not as a father, but as a businessman, growing with every minute. And what was even more surprising, I could feel his respect for me growing as well. He saw that I had done my homework. He saw that I wasn't just a creative type playing at business. He saw a founder who was ready to fight for her company. When our C-base arrived, we both took a pause. The atmosphere at the table had changed. The tension had dissipated, replaced by a sense of mutual respect. You've changed, Jessica, he said, setting down his fork. 2 years ago, you couldn't have had this conversation. 2 years ago, I wouldn't have had a reason to, I replied. I was busy building a business that is now worth investing in. He nodded, and in that nod, there was something more than just agreement. There was acknowledgement. I'll incorporate your proposed amendments into the documents, he said. My lawyer will contact yours. If everything is in order, we can close the deal by the end of next week. As we were about to leave, he asked an unexpected question. This Marcus, is he a good man? I was taken aback. We had just spent an hour and a half negotiating a $250,000 deal. And now he was asking me about my sister's fiancé. Yes, I said after a thought. He's smart, decent. And he seems to really love Natalie. Good, he said, and it seemed to me he said it with relief. That's important. In that moment, I realized that at the negotiating table sat not just an investor. My father was still there. A father who worried about the future of both his daughters, even if he expressed it in his own way, through the lens of business and success. Walking out of Morton's into the sun-drenched street, I felt exhausted but exhilarated. I hadn't just negotiated better terms for my company. I had defended my right to a seat at the table. I had proven, not just to him but to myself, that I was not just Robert Thompson's daughter. I was Jessica Thompson, the founder and CEO of Cooper Creative. And my company would be built on my terms. On my way back to my makeshift office, I thought about how much everything had changed. A week ago, I couldn't have dreamed of such a meeting. I would have been afraid to even look my father in the eye, let alone argue with him over investment terms. But Marcus's toes his. The wait for a response from Prime Health was agonizing. Every time my phone made a sound, my heart leaped into my throat. I tried to distract myself with work, but my thoughts kept returning to that meeting in their glass and stone conference room. I replayed my every answer, their every question, trying to find signs I might have missed. Was I too confident? Was I persuasive enough? On Friday afternoon, when I had almost given up hope of hearing from them this week, the phone rang. The screen displayed a Seattle area code I didn't recognize. I took a deep breath and answered. "Jessica Thompson," said the voice on the other end. It was James Richardson. His tone was businesslike, without preamble. "I'll get straight to the point. We were impressed with your presentation and your approach. After internal discussion, we'd like to move forward with Cooper Creative as our partner for the patient portal redesign project, with strong consideration for a broader engagement, depending on the initial results." I forced myself to maintain professional composure, though a fireworks display was going off inside me. "I did it. We did it." "That's excellent news, James," I said, trying to keep my voice from trembling. "We're confident we can deliver exceptional results for Prime Health. When would you like to schedule the official kickoff meeting?" "Melissa is preparing the contract documents as we speak. We'd like to begin next Monday if that timeline works for your team." After confirming the details and ending the call, I froze for a moment. I sat at my desk in my one-bedroom apartment, and the world around me seemed to be spinning. Prime Health, a client that typically only worked with agencies tens of times our size, had chosen us. They had chosen Cooper Creative because of our specialized expertise and innovative approach. This wasn't just another win. It was validation on a completely different level. It was a ticket to the major leagues. The first thing I did was call Andrea. She was between meetings, but I couldn't wait. "Prime Health is a yes," I blurted out as soon as she picked up. "Contract is coming today. Kickoff next Monday." Her delighted laugh came through the phone like music. "You did it. We did it. This changes everything, Jess. Meet me at that office space at 4. If we're taking on Prime Health, we need a proper headquarters immediately." The industrial building downtown, which we had scouted, turned out to be even more perfect in person than in the photos. Open plan brick walls, huge windows, and a polished concrete floor. Most importantly, it was available immediately and offered the flexibility to configure the space to our needs. "This is it," Andrea said, standing in the middle of the main area. Her expression mirrored my own certainty. "I can already see the workstations along that wall. The conference room in that corner. A creative space by the windows." I nodded, mentally placing the team we were building into this physical manifestation of Cooper Creative's evolution. "Let's make it official," I said. "I'll call the leasing agent." By evening, we had secured the office space, received and reviewed the contract from Prime Health, and drafted job descriptions for 3 additional positions we would need to support our expanding client roster. We sat in a quiet restaurant on the waterfront, and Andrea raised her glass. "To Cooper Creative 2.0, she said. "From survival to significance in record time." "To partnerships that matter," I countered. "And to proving that the right approach wins in the end." As we clinked glasses, my phone buzzed. A text from my father. "Signed documents received. Congratulations on Prime Health. Let's discuss growth acceleration strategy once you're settled." It was so typically Robert Thompson, acknowledging the achievement while immediately focusing on the next steps and future performance. But something in our relationship had fundamentally shifted. The acknowledgement wasn't grudging or qualified. It was a genuine recognition from one business professional to another. Later that same evening, as I was packing files in my apartment in preparation for the move to the office, a text arrived from Natalie. "Heard about your new client from Dad. Congratulations." Simple, direct, without effusive warmth, but also without the passive-aggressive undertones that had characterized our recent exchanges. A small step, perhaps, but a significant one. I replied just as simply, "Thanks. It's an exciting development for the agency." The next 3 weeks were a hurricane. We signed the lease. I hired designers to help us plan the space. Furniture was ordered, computers and software were purchased. I interviewed a dozen candidates and hired 2 junior staff members, a content specialist with healthcare industry experience, and a digital analyst. They were young, hungry, and eager to be part of something new. Andrea took the lead on the strategy for Healthream and Vertex, freeing me up to focus on Prime Health and the overall business development. We worked 16-hour days, fueled by pizza and coffee, but I had never felt more alive. Every day brought new challenges and new victories. We were a team, building something from the ground up, and that shared purpose created an incredible sense of camaraderie. On moving day, Andrea and I stood in the middle of our new, still empty office. Sunlight streamed through the huge windows, playing on the brick walls. The smell of fresh paint mingled with the scent of new carpet. "Can you believe this?" Andrea asked, her voice full of awe. "A month ago, you were alone in your apartment, and I was suffocating at PNB." "I believed it was possible," I said. "But I didn't think it would happen this fast." In that moment, I realized just how much my life had changed. I was no longer a lone warrior fighting against the world. I had a team. I had a partner. I had an office. I had clients I could only have dreamed of before. The following week, once we were mostly settled, we had our kickoff meeting with Prime Health. This time it was on our turf, in our new conference room. I led the meeting, laying out our plan for the first 90 days. Andrea supported me, adding strategic nuances. Our new team was present, taking notes and asking intelligent questions. James Richardson and his team were impressed. Not just with our plan, but with our energy, our cohesion. "You guys don't waste any time," Richardson said with an appreciative smile at the end of the meeting. "I have a feeling we made the right decision." After they left, we had a small celebration in the office. We ordered champagne and sushi and toasted our first big win in our new home. "To Cooper Creative," I said, raising my glass. "May this be just the beginning." That evening, as I was the last to leave the office, I paused for a moment at the door. I looked at the empty desks, the white boards covered in ideas, the city lights outside the window. This was mine. Ours. It was real. The triumph felt not like a loud, fanfare-filled victory, but like a quiet, deep sense of satisfaction. It was the realization that I was exactly where I was supposed to be, doing exactly what I was supposed to be doing. I no longer needed my family's approval to feel successful. Their acknowledgement was a nice bonus, but not the foundation of my self-worth. The foundation was these brick walls, these contracts, this team, this growing business, which was living proof that my path, though different from the conventional one, was the right one. At least for me. I opened the door and stepped into my new reality. The horizons were limitless. In the midst of Cooper Creative's dizzying ascent, my relationship with Natalie remained as taut as a wire. After her brief, almost formal congratulations, we barely spoke. I was consumed by work, and she by the preparations for the wedding of the year, as our mother called it. We existed in parallel universes that intersected only at mandatory family events, where we exchanged polite but empty phrases. I knew my success hurt her. Not because she wished me ill. At least I wanted to believe that. But because it disrupted the established order of things. Our entire lives she had been the star, and I, her shadow. She was the role model, and I, the cautionary tale. She was the embodiment of the right choices, and I, living proof of what happens when you stray from the beaten path. My success didn't just question her superiority. It questioned the very value system upon which our family was built. The engagement photo shoot was approaching, the very event at the Botanical Gardens where I was expected to be on time. I felt the tension days before. This would be the first major family gathering since my success had become an undeniable fact, reinforced by a new office and prestigious clients. I knew all eyes would be on Natalie and me, searching for signs of hostility or reconciliation. That Saturday, I arrived at the Botanical Gardens 15 minutes before the scheduled time. I wanted to deny Natalie even the slightest reason for reproach. I saw them from a distance. Natalie in an elegant white dress, looking like a bride from a magazine cover, and Marcus in a perfectly tailored suit. Next to them stood our parents and Marcus's family, pleasant, wealthy people I had met at the engagement party. When I approached, Natalie shot me a quick glance, her expression a mix of surprise at my punctuality. "Jessica, you're here," she said. "I promised I would be," I replied with a light smile. The photo shoot was long and exhausting. The photographer made us strike unnatural poses, smile on command, and portray a perfect, happy family. I tried my best. I smiled, hugged Natalie when asked, and complimented her dress. But I felt like an actress in a poorly staged play. The tension between us was almost palpable. Every time our eyes met, I saw a mixture of resentment, envy, and something else I couldn't decipher in hers. During one of the breaks, while the photographer was changing lenses, Natalie came over to me. We were standing aside from the others, near the rose garden. "You look tired," she said. It wasn't a compliment. "The last few weeks have been intense," I answered neutrally. "Launching new projects, moving into the office." "Must be nice," she said, a note of bitterness in her voice. "To have a father who solves all your capital problems." It was a low blow. She was devaluing everything I had done, reducing my success to our father's money. "Dad's investment was important," I said, trying to remain calm. "But it doesn't solve all the problems. It creates new ones. Responsibility, expectations, pressure. I'm not playing with his money, Natalie. I'm building a business that's supposed to bring him a return." "Oh, I'm sure," she sniped. "But you have to admit, it's a bit easier when you have that kind of safety net." At that moment, I could have fired back. I could have reminded her that her safety net, a prestigious education, our parents' connections, a flawless career, had been provided to her from birth. I could have said that I, unlike her, had risked everything, putting my reputation and financial stability on the line. But I looked at her and saw not just my envious sister. I saw a confused woman whose world had been turned upside down. "Yes," I said quietly. "It is easier. And I'm grateful for the opportunity. But it doesn't erase the 2 years I worked without a day off, barely making ends meet, while everyone, including you, thought I was a failure. That safety net only appeared after I proved I could fly on my own." Natalie was silent. She stared at the roses, and I saw a muscle twitch in her cheek. "I never thought you were a failure," she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. "Really?" I gave a humorless chuckle. "Little venture? Playing entrepreneur? Make us a website for your portfolio?" That didn't sound like support, Natalie. She turned to me, and in her eyes, I saw something new. Not anger but pain. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't know it was so serious. I don't know what I thought. I thought it was just another one of your whims, like when you decided to be an artist in college." I was 19, Natalie. And it wasn't a whim. I was searching for myself. And now I found myself. "I'm sorry you can't see that." "I do see it," she said so quietly I could barely hear her. "I see it now. Everyone sees it. Dad talks about you in a way he's never talked about me. He talks about your strategy, your business acumen. He doesn't talk about me like that. I'm just doing well at my job." And then it hit me. It wasn't just envy of my success. It was jealousy. Jealousy of the new attention and respect from our father, which she had always considered her monopoly. All her life, she had played by his rules and received his approval. And I had broken all the rules and still got it. And that was unbearable for her. "Natalie," I said, and my anger was replaced by a strange empathy. "Dad's approval isn't a competition. We can both be successful, each in our own way. Your path is no less valuable than mine." "Easy for you to say," she scoffed bitterly. "Now that you're his favorite." "The photographer is ready," an assistant shouted, interrupting our conversation. We returned to the group, and I put my happy sister mask back on. But something had changed. That short, painful conversation had breached the wall that had separated us for years. For the first time in a long time, we had said something close to the truth to each other. After the photo shoot, a family lunch was planned at the country club. I sat at the table between Marcus and my mother, and felt much calmer. The conversation with Natalie, though difficult, had brought some relief. We had brought out into the light what had been festering in the dark for so long. Natalie was quiet during lunch. She made no more sarcastic remarks. She was lost in her thoughts. At one point, when Marcus was telling a funny story about his work, I caught her eye. She looked at me without hostility. There was something like thoughtfulness in her gaze, maybe even a reluctant respect. As we were saying goodbye in the parking lot, she approached me. "That website. she said, looking down at her feet. The wedding website. I know you're too busy for that now. We've hired professionals. That's fine, I said. But maybe you could look at it when it's ready? Just give your opinion. As an expert. I looked at her and saw not my arrogant older sister, but just my sister. Vulnerable, and trying to find a new way to communicate with someone she no longer understood. Of course, I said. I'd be happy to. She nodded and quickly walked to her car. I watched her go and realized that this was not the end of our complicated story, but it was the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter in which, perhaps, we could find our way back to each other. Not as rivals fighting for approval, but as two different, yet strong women in our own right. As sisters. It wasn't a full reconciliation. It was a truce. Fragile, uncertain, but real. And at that moment, it felt like a victory no less important than the prime health contract. Because some of the horizons that open up before you are not in the world of business, but in the world of human relationships. And those, I was beginning to understand, were no less valuable. 3 months had passed. 3 months that flew by in a single, dizzying moment that changed everything. I stood by the huge window in our new office, looking out at the sprawling city of Seattle below. The city hummed with its usual business-like energy, but to me, it looked different. It was no longer a hostile environment where I fought for survival. It had become a field of opportunities, a landscape upon which I was building my empire. Behind me, the office was buzzing with activity. Our space, which had recently been an empty shell with the smell of paint, was now filled with energy. 6 workstations were occupied by talented, passionate people whom Andrea and I had carefully selected. Sarah and Miguel, my loyal collaborators from the very beginning, now led their own small teams. The whiteboards were covered with diagrams, ideas, and strategies for our clients. The air was thick with that special hum of productive creativity I had dreamed of for so long. On the glass wall of our conference room, an elegant list of logos now gleamed. HealthReam, Vertex Solutions, Prime Health Network, and several others we had managed to bring on in that time. This list wasn't just a display of success. It was a symbol of our journey, from an unknown startup to an agency to be reckoned with. My phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. Heading into a board meeting with Vertex Solutions. The early numbers from your campaign launch look exceptional. Congratulations. They're already discussing expanding the contract. I smiled and typed a brief thank you. I was no longer surprised by such messages. Marcus had become an unexpected but reliable ally in the business world. Our relationship remained strictly professional, but I knew I could count on his advice or support. He never mentioned it to Natalie, and neither did I. It was our unspoken agreement, part of the complex diplomacy we had all mastered. I returned to the table where Andrea was leading a creative review with our content team. I joined the discussion, offering my insights on the client's objectives. I looked at the faces of my colleagues, focused, engaged, full of ideas, and felt a deep, all-encompassing sense of satisfaction. This was true success. Not the hard-won approval of my father. Not the reluctant truce with my sister. Not the external validation from people who had once despised me. Success was this very moment. A moment of collaborative creation, of building, of moving toward a common goal with people who shared my vision. It was a sense of belonging to something greater than myself. The journey from that humiliating evening at Natalie's engagement party to this day had been swift and profoundly transformative. My sister's mockery, intended to diminish me, had instead become a catalyst. It had compelled Marcus to stand up for me, which in turn had made my father see me in a new light. His investment gave us resources, and the Prime Health contract gave us a reputation. It was a chain of events that had accelerated Cooper Creative's growth and my own professional evolution. But now looking back, I understood that a catalyst is not the cause. The foundation had been laid long before that evening. It was built during 2 long, lonely years. It was composed of sleepless nights, of hundreds of rejected proposals, of small victories that no one saw. It was built on my stubborn, irrational belief that Cooper Creative could become something significant, even when no one but me believed in it. Perhaps the most important thing I had learned during this time was that true value does not require external validation. Seeking approval from those who are unwilling or unable to give it is a road to nowhere. True strength lies in creating spaces, be it a company, a team, or a circle of friends, where your value is recognized and amplified by those who share your vision. Our family dinners had changed. The tension still arose sometimes, but it was no longer suffocating. Natalie and I had found a new, cautious form of communication. We talked about work, but without rivalry. She would talk about her consulting projects, and I about ours. We learned to acknowledge each other's successes, albeit without effusive praise. One day, she showed me the design for her wedding website, and I gave her some professional advice which, to my surprise, she took. It was a small step, but it meant a universe. She no longer saw me as a threat. She saw me as an expert, a sister. My relationship with my father had also transformed. He remained a demanding investor. His quarterly reviews were a stern test. But there was no longer judgment in his demands. There was partnership. Sometimes, after business discussions, he would ask me about things unrelated to work, about the books I was reading, my vacation plans. He was trying, in his own clumsy way, to get to know me not as his investment project, but as his daughter. One evening, after a particularly stressful week, Andrea and I were sitting in our office, finishing the last of the wine from a work celebration. "You know what I'm thinking about?" she said, looking out at the panoramic view of the city at night. "About the woman you were at your sister's engagement party. The one who sat there and took the humiliation." I nodded, remembering that night. It seemed so distant, as if it had happened in another lifetime. "I think about her sometimes too," I admitted. "She would be proud of you," Andrea said, "of who you've become." And I realized she was right. That woman, cowering under a barrage of ridicule, hadn't disappeared. She was a part of me. She was the fuel that had powered my drive to prove, not to them, but to myself, that I was capable of more. But I was no longer her. I was the architect of my own reality. I had built this company, this team, this life. And I had done it not in spite of my family, but independently of them. Their approval or disapproval had ceased to be the measure of my success. The measure was the glowing computer screens of my employees, engrossed in their latest project. The measure was the enthusiastic testimonials from our clients. The measure was the sense of pride and fulfillment I felt every day walking into this office. The woman who had once sat humiliated at her sister's engagement dinner was gone. In her place was someone who understood that true validation comes not from without. It is born from the courage to pursue your own vision, regardless of who believes in you. Because in the end, the most important person who has to believe in you is yourself. I smiled at Andrea, raising my glass. "To her," I said, "and to everything that lies ahead." There was much work ahead. New challenges, new clients, new heights to conquer. But I was no longer afraid. I knew I had everything I needed for this journey. A strong team, a reliable partner, and most importantly, an unshakable belief in myself. I was where I was supposed to be. I was home.